Dan Bongino called Pam Bondi part of the problem. His words cut sharp, his tone heavy, the room tense. For a moment, it looked like he had set the stage against her. Then Bondi answered, calm, exact. And what she pulled out was something Bongino had forgotten. The silence that followed wasn't his alone. Even the reporters in the back row froze mid-scribble. And the real fight was only beginning. Hit like, tap subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? Every hearing begins with order, but order doesn't last long when pride collides with patience. The hearing chamber was packed tighter than usual. The air smelled of old wood, ink, and nervous sweat. A dozen cameras framed the long table at the center, their lenses fixed on the two names the press had come to see. On one side sat Pam Bondi, posture straight, notes stacked neatly, her eyes calm behind the soft gleam of the microphone light. On the other sat Dan Bongino, his broad shoulders squared, his gaze sharp, ready to pounce. It was billed as a hearing on FBI oversight, but everyone in the room knew the cameras weren't there for dry procedure. They were there for the clash. Bondi, former state attorney, sharp and disciplined. Bongino, ex-Secret Service, radio firebrand, blunt as a hammer. Their reputations had already filled the air before the gavel ever struck. The chairman opened the session with formality, but his words were lost in the room's tension. Bongino's name drew murmurs from the gallery. Bondi's silence drew scribbles from the press row. By the time introductions ended, the battle lines were set. Bongino launched first. He leaned forward, hands flat on the table, voice booming without hesitation. The FBI's failures are not accidents, they are habits, and habits are shaped by people. People like you, Pam Bondi. You're not solving the problem. You are part of the problem. His words echoed like a slap, filling the chamber with gasps. The gallery reacted instantly. Half the room clapped, others hissed, and reporters scribbled so fast their pens screeched. The phrase, part of the problem, was headline material. It was the kind of cut meant to wound before the first answer could even begin. Bondi didn't move. Her chin remained level, her pen untouched beside her notes. She didn't scowl, didn't frown, didn't smile. The cameras zoomed in, waiting for a crack, but there was none. Her stillness itself became an optic. Bongino loud, forceful, animated. Bondi calm, composed, silent. The moderator tried to settle the room, but Bongino doubled down. You've sat in rooms where the Bureau bent rules. You've watched prosecutors fumble charges. You've defended the very practices that keep this agency broken. Don't sit there and pretend you're separate. You sat in it. You're part of it. His voice rose again, each accusation aimed like a spear. Bondi let the accusation stack, brick by brick, until the air grew heavy. Then, finally, she adjusted her microphone, her voice clear but quiet. Mr. Bongino, you've listed many failures, but in doing so, you've forgotten something. She paused just long enough for the silence to thicken. You were there too. A reminder cuts deepest when it turns the finger-pointing hand back toward the accuser. Gasps cracked through the gallery. Reporters froze mid-scribble, then tore their pens across paper, circling the phrase. Bongino stiffened, but Bondi didn't follow with volume. She stayed still, letting the silence weigh. The attorneys at the side tables leaned back in their chairs, eyes darting between the two. Clerks shifted, unsure if they should keep writing or just watch. The chairman frowned, but said nothing. His gavel would have sounded weak in the moment. Bongino tried to smirk, tried to wave it off, but the optics were unforgiving. He had thrown the first punch, but Bondi's calm reminder had shifted the weight back. The stage was set. This was no longer just about FBI oversight. It was about memory. About who remembered what, and who wished the past would stay buried. An accusation can rattle the room once, but to make it stick, the accuser has to push harder. Bongino pushed harder. His voice filled the chamber like a charge, sharp, fast, relentless. Pam Bondi sat in power, while FBI agents ran cover for corruption. She stood silent while investigations dragged. She turned her head when the Bureau broke trust with the American people. And now she sits here, pretending she wasn't a part of it. The words cracked like gunfire, each one meant to stick, to paint her not as a witness, but as a suspect. The gallery stirred. Some nodded, some frowned, some whispered to each other in short, urgent bursts. The press row scribbled furiously, their notes already shaping the headline, "Bongino calls Bondi, part of the problem." The optics tilted his way, if only for a moment. Bondi kept still. She didn't raise her pen, didn't shuffle her papers. Her stillness contrasted with his motion. She let him pile accusation on accusation until the weight of his own words began to lean heavy on the room. Then, when the chamber fell quiet, long enough for her voice to cut clean, she spoke. "Dan, you've repeated the same line 3 different ways. And in each one, you forgot something." She lifted a sheet of paper from her notes and set it squarely on the desk. Her tone was calm, surgical. "You forgot the part where you defended the very policies you're now condemning." The room cracked. Gasps cut through the silence. Some in the gallery leaned forward sharply. Others froze in their seats. The reporters' pens didn't move at first, then tore across the page. Bongino's face tightened. He jabbed a finger in her direction. "That's a lie. I never defended corruption. I never defended this broken system." His words came quick, clipped, too fast. Bondi didn't flinch. She didn't raise her volume. "Your record says otherwise. I'll be happy to read it later, line by line. A calm promise of receipts weighs heavier than a storm of denials." The gallery murmured, restless now. Bongino tried to recover, his voice rising louder. "This isn't about me. This is about you. You've been part of the failures that gutted the Bureau. You can't run from that." His words boomed, but the force rang hollow. Bondi leaned forward slightly, her tone steady. "No, Dan. This is about both of us. And only one of us seems to remember where we stood when it mattered." The silence that followed pressed heavier than any gavel strike. Reporters exchanged glances. The optics had shifted again. Bongino had doubled down, but Bondi had fired her first sting line, and it stuck. Accusations can roar like thunder, but defense always sounds different. It comes rushed, jagged, uneven. Bongino leaned forward, both palms flat on the table, his voice rising fast. "Don't twist my record, Pam. I stood up for this country every day I wore the badge. I protected presidents. I called out corruption long before you cared to lift a finger. Don't sit there and tell me I defended the garbage we're seeing today." His tone shook the microphones, carrying into the farthest corner of the gallery. But the room wasn't leaning the way it had at the start. The first outburst had shocked them. The second rattled them. But this one felt different. Defensive. The gallery's eyes narrowed. The press row's pens scratched with more focus. They weren't writing his accusations anymore. They were writing his cracks. Bondi remained still. She pulled a folder from her stack, flipped it open, and placed a page on top. "Dan, since you brought up your record, let's examine it." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She read clearly. "In 2016, on your radio show, you praised the Bureau's handling of national security cases, calling it efficient and honest. That's your voice. Your words." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Reporters scribbled hard, some circling the date. Bongino shook his head. "Quick. Context. You're ripping it out of context." "That was a general statement. I didn't know then what we know now." His voice pitched higher. Bondi slid another page across the table. 2018, Congressional Testimony. You said, quote, "The Bureau's leadership has flaws, but its work remains critical and worthy of trust." Those are your words, Dan. That's not context. That's testimony. The gallery murmured louder. A senator sitting in the back row raised his eyebrows, leaned toward a colleague. The optics were shifting sharply. Bondi calm, reading receipts. Bongino loud, trying to rewrite his past. When words from the past return, shouting can't erase the ink. Bongino slammed his hand against the table. That was before the rot got deeper. Before the scandals blew up. Everyone knows it's worse now. His voice cracked faintly, the strain clear. The cameras caught the moment, sweat forming on his temple, jaw tight, words spilling too fast. Bondi placed her hands flat on the folder, her tone cutting, surgical. So, your defense is that you praised the Bureau until it stopped being convenient to you. And now you call me part of the problem. Interesting. The gallery gasped again, sharper this time. Some in the press row underlined praised until convenient twice. The silence after stretched long enough for everyone in the room to feel the tilt. Bongino tried to fire back, but the rhythm was gone. His words overlapped themselves, his tone jagged. Bondi stayed calm, letting each contradiction speak louder than his denials. By the end of the exchange, the room no longer saw a strong accuser and a quiet witness. They saw a man cracking under his own record and a woman calmly holding the mirror. Force can hold attention for a while, but once polish slips, force begins to look like flailing. Bongino was no longer sharp. His rhythm, once clean and cutting, now came ragged, words tumbling into each other. He jabbed the table with his finger, voice booming, each line a swing instead of a strike. Pam Bondi sat through scandal after scandal. She nodded while the Bureau stumbled. She looked away when real accountability was needed. And now she wants to act like she's the voice of truth? Don't buy it. Not for a second. His chest rose and fell quickly, his tone clipped and rough. The gallery heard it. The press row heard it. Everyone in the chamber saw the shift. This wasn't the crisp former agent laying out accusations. This was anger trying to fill the space where certainty had cracked. Pens scratched harder, some reporters underlining words like flailing and anger in their notes. The gallery's whispers sharpened. The room could feel it slipping. Bondi didn't match his fire. She let his rant burn itself out like a flame chasing oxygen. When the last syllable landed, she leaned forward slightly, her voice steady, exact. Dan, you talk like you were the only one who ever stood guard. But you forget. You weren't guarding the truth. You were guarding the system that broke trust. The silence was immediate. No murmurs, no whispers, just stillness heavy enough to press down on the bench. Bongino's face tightened. He barked back, his voice raw. That's garbage. I swore an oath. I bled for this country. I don't need lectures from you about trust. His hands shook slightly as he slammed one palm against the table. The microphone popped with the force. Bondi kept her composure, her tone almost cold. Oaths are only as strong as the memory of them, and yours seems selective. A single cold reminder can slice deeper than 100 shouted defenses. Gasps rippled across the gallery. Reporters froze mid-scribble before scrawling furiously, some circling the word selective twice. The attorneys at the side tables stopped writing altogether, one leaning back slowly in his chair, eyes fixed on the clash. Bongino tried to push back again. Don't twist my service. Don't you dare. You're the one who bent the rules. His tone cracked hard on dare, a break caught instantly by the cameras. Bondi didn't raise her volume. She delivered one surgical line, quiet and final. I didn't bend the rules, Dan. I'm the one reminding you of them. The chamber froze. The silence that followed was heavier than any of the gavel strikes earlier. The optics were decisive. Bongino red-faced, loud, breaking polish. Bondi steady, cutting with restraint. The break had arrived, and the courtroom knew who held control. A hearing can be steered by words, but the second a leak enters the room, the steering wheel belongs to the paper. The tension had already cracked the chamber. Bongino loud, Bondi sharp, the gallery restless. Reporters scribbled furiously, the press row watching like hawks. And then the vibration spread. Phones lit up across the benches. A murmur passed down the row. An aide slipped a folded sheet to the moderator, who scanned it, eyes widening before sliding it closer to the chairman. The chairman cleared his throat, voice cutting through the air. A development has just come in. A document obtained this afternoon, an internal memo from the Bureau dated 2 years ago. Mr. Bongino, it references your oversight role on security procedures, and notes that you personally approved measures you now criticize as failures. The chamber cracked wide open. Gasps rippled, sharp and loud. Reporters leapt forward, phones raised, pens slashing at paper. The gallery erupted in murmurs, some turning their heads toward Bongino, others toward Bondi. The optics shifted in a heartbeat. Bongino stiffened, jaw tight. That's fake. Out of context. Typical smear job. His voice was fast, sharp, but rushed. He raised a hand, dismissing the paper as though it carried no weight. Bondi didn't rush. She lifted the copy that had been slid toward her and held it steady under the chamber lights. Mr. Bongino, it's dated. It's signed. It's in your own hand. Her tone was calm, exact, each syllable slicing deeper. Gasps cracked again. Reporters scribbled harder, circling the word signed twice, underlining your own hand. A denial shouted can fade. A signature on paper never does. Bongino's face flushed. He jabbed a finger toward the document. Those were different circumstances. Everyone in this room knows you can't cherry-pick a memo from years ago. His words tumbled out, uneven, the rhythm broken. Bondi lowered the page onto her stack and folded her hands. Years ago? Dan, this isn't cherry-picking. It's your name. On the same policies you now say I enabled. The silence that followed was brutal. The gallery froze, murmurs replaced by stillness. Even the attorneys at their side tables glanced sideways, eyes wide, their pens long abandoned. Bongino tried again, louder this time. This is political theater. It's a setup. You know it, and she knows it. His words thundered, but the echo didn't land. Bondi didn't need to raise her tone. She leaned towards the microphone, calm as stone. It's not a setup, Dan. It's your memory, leaking back into this room. The chamber gasped again, sharper than before. Cameras zoomed, reporters circled the line. The optics were decisive. Bongino loud, angry, cracking. Bondi calm, holding the leak like a weapon she hadn't needed to swing. Just display. By the end of the exchange, the courtroom no longer saw a firebrand exposing a problem. They saw a man exposed by his own paper trail. A leaked memo can wound, but a man's own words, read back in his own voice, can corner him completely. Bondi didn't wave the leaked memo anymore. She didn't need to. She reached for a thin folder marked with 3 tabs, the edges worn from preparation. The room stilled. Reporters knew what this meant. Past words, preserved in ink or audio, about to come alive again. She opened the first tab and read slowly, her voice steady. Dan Bongino, May 2017, Congressional Testimony. The Bureau, for all its flaws, remains a critical line of defense. Its men and women deserve our support, not scorn. Those are your words, Dan. Not mine. The gallery shifted uneasily. A senator raised his eyebrows. Reporters scribbled the quote in bold, underlining support, not scorn. Bongino tightened his jaw, replying fast. That was before the rot exposed itself. Before everything changed. You're dragging up words from a different world. His tone was hard, but the rhythm jagged, rushed. Bondi turned to the second tab. September 2018. Radio broadcast. Pam Bondi understands the balance between enforcement and accountability. She's one of the few who gets it right. Again, your words, not mine. Gasps cracked through the gallery. Reporters circled her name, arrows pointing between Bondi and Bongino. The optics stung. His attack today stood in sharp contrast with his praise then. Bongino shook his head violently. That was radio filler. You know how it is. You say things to move the segment along. That doesn't mean I believed it. The explanation landed flat. Laughter wasn't in the room anymore. Disbelief was. When praise turns into accusation, the question is not if, it's why. Bondi lifted the last tab, the one marked in red. Her voice slowed, deliberate. January 2019, Keynote Security Conference. If we ever abandon transparency in handling public funds, we will lose the people's trust. And without trust, we lose justice itself. Those are your words, Dan. Not aspirational, not filler. Public, recorded, delivered to applause. The chamber erupted in gasps. Some in the gallery sat back hard in their seats. Even the clerks froze, pens dangling midair. Reporters wrote one phrase in all caps. "We lose justice itself." Bongino's face burned. He leaned toward his mic, voice breaking. "That's not the same thing." "You're twisting!" Bondi cut him off, her tone surgical. "So, were you wrong then, or are you wrong now?" The silence was suffocating. Cameras zoomed in on Bongino's face, flushed, tight, searching for words that wouldn't come. The gallery stared, frozen. The optics were sealed. His past read back to him, standing taller than his present denials. The hearing wasn't about her anymore. It was about the contradiction he couldn't escape. A clash can survive shouting, leaks, even receipts, but it cannot survive one final line that leaves the room breathless. Bongino tried to recover, his voice raw, his chest rising quick. "This is what you do, Pam. You twist. You take fragments out of context, and you smear good people who actually stood up for this country. You call me a hypocrite. Look at yourself. You sat in office while the bureau failed, and you smiled through it." His hands cut through the air as he spoke, his tone loud, almost desperate. The gallery sat stiff, the press row scribbling faster than ever. But the louder he grew, the more ragged it sounded. Reporters didn't write his accusations anymore. They wrote his breaks. Bondi waited. She let the rant echo until it collapsed into its own silence. Then she leaned towards the microphone, her voice calm, cold, exact. "Dan, the difference between us is simple. I remember what I said, and I stand by it. You only remember when it's convenient." The silence slammed into the chamber. The gallery froze. Even the clerks behind the bench stopped mid-note, their pens hovering above paper. Reporters circled her line twice, some underlining "remember what I said" until their pens tore the page. Bongino opened his mouth, but no words came fast enough. He shifted in his chair, his face flushed, his jaw tight. He muttered something about lies and context, but it was low, uneven. Nothing like the booming certainty from before. A cold line doesn't need to be repeated. The room repeats it for you. Bondi didn't press further. She gathered her papers, capped her pen, and stacked everything neatly before her. Then she pushed back her chair, the scrape echoing louder than Bongino's last words. She rose, unhurried, and walked out, leaving the silence heavier than the gavel ever could. The optics were devastating. Bongino left red-faced, gripping his microphone, searching for a reply that never landed. Bondi left calm, composed, surgical, her final line echoing in the silence she didn't need to fill. The gallery didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just stared, knowing the clash had ended with one sentence no volume could erase. If that line hit you, hit like, tap subscribe, and tell me in the comments, how old are you? And do you think leaders should be judged more by their words or their actions? And if you missed it, go watch the last clash. The one where Judge Jackson laughed at Kennedy until he left her in silence. That clip makes this one even sharper. Click it now.